Hey, and welcome to the podcast Connected with Melissa J. Scott. Today I have an amazing woman with me, Karyn Battersby, and we're going to be talking all about self-love.
Yeah, one of my favourite topics.
It is. Now, I met Karyn quite a few years ago at a business event, and she's also been a personal counsellor to me in periods of my life when I've needed, some counselling and some guidance on how to do life and how to really get to know who I am and get more connected to myself. And I thought there is nobody better to talk to about the topic of self-love than you.
Beautiful.
So, we haven't really planned or prepared this really well. We're speaking very much off the cuff. They're the best conversations sometimes.
That's how we do conversations, isn't it?
So, I guess what I want to talk about is, and I've touched on this before with people, is people think self-love is all about having a bath, having a glass of wine at the end of the day and unwinding, or taking time out and going to a beauty salon for half a day and then getting back into their ridiculous schedules. Yeah. But, you and I know that that's not self-love. Do you want to sort of give us a bit of a broad statement on really what self-love looks like?
Yeah, gosh, and that is a huge topic, obviously. It's a massive topic. But what does self-love look like? So self-love is everything from our boundaries and who we allow into our life and knowing who we are, and that's the good and bad of who we are, so the dark side and the light side of ourselves.
Well, that's a topic in itself.
Absolutely. We can go down that rabbit hole, but we won't. And accepting and embracing and loving all of that. So without being willing to expose some of that darker stuff that we hold, shadow work is one of the ways that people refer to that.
So that's what that means with shadow work, is really about when you go to the bits that you prefer to hide, the bits that you actually don't like about yourself.
Yeah, the things that you might feel a little bit of shame about, or a little bit of guilt about, or a little bit of, I'd be embarrassed if people knew that about me, all right? And oftentimes the only people who know that are, your most intimate partners and friends, and we keep it hidden very much from the rest of the world, and we probably often don't even tell our partners and best friends, but because they're intimately in our lives, they see it. They see the manifestations of it. They see how we're triggered by those things.
I was going to say, I actually hide my darker side as much as I can.
Right, and that is our instinct, because we think it's unlovable, right? And so what you're doing is you're orphaning that side of yourself, which self-love is actually bringing that side into and loving it as well. Okay, so it's instead of orphaning it and going, I don't want anybody to know, and I'm not going to acknowledge it even to myself, and certainly not to the people who I'm intimate with, let alone the rest of the world, you kind of try to cut it off from yourself and deny that you have that. So you have to embrace it and bring it into, and I'm going to use the word integrate, but bring it into acknowledgement, and then work on those things. You're not going to, it's not about self-improvement and, I'm going to fix this part of myself. It's about saying, well, that is a unique part of who I am. It's actually a beautiful part of who I am. It's where I'm vulnerable. It's where I'm, So it's the vulnerability, the shame, the guilt, and the ugly bits of ourselves that we suspect are really unlovable. And so we don't want to acknowledge them and share them with anybody.
So we spend our whole life hiding from them and hiding ourselves from people, so we don't then have a proper relationship or connection to them.
Right. And you want to know what's really, really beautiful? So when we love ourselves and we embrace those darker pieces of ourselves, or the bits that we're not, happy for everybody to know, and we actually share that with someone that we're intimate with, right, and they accept and acknowledge it, that's when you truly feel seen and loved. So it's the deepest connection that you can have is when somebody knows those ugly parts of you and loves you anyway, or because of those, because it makes you more human and more vulnerable and more relatable.
So there's so many wonderful catchwords that I'm hearing, like, vulnerability, shame. People, Brene Brown talks about it. I know lots of other people talk about it.
One of my,
fangirl,
my gurus, fangirl.
And sorry, but I think it's really easy. So we throw these words around like do the work and work on yourself and get to know yourself, but that's confusing for most people. Like, what does that even mean? Like, how do you get to know yourself? when you spent a lifetime feeling that you need to hide yourself to be lovable. How do you do this?
Okay, so...
Big question.
It is a big question, and I feel like I can't answer it without talking about egoic death, which is just another big word.
No, I love it. Egoic death.
So we talk about egoic or psychic death, right? And this is a subject that I've kind of been talking a little bit about myself lately with my clients and on my pages. What that is, it's allowing the facade or the projected version of ourselves to fall away, right? So true authenticity is showing up with all of this dark part of ourselves and acknowledging it and allowing people to see it and go, well, I'm human and I'm flawed, but I'm perfect, right?
But I'm imperfectly perfect.
Right. Yeah. That's a catch cry that you do here. And I do love it. I do love it. But you're imperfectly perfect. You're perfect just the way you are, even though you're imperfect, right?
Yeah.
So this egoic death, or this allowing all of that side to drop away, it's often a face down in the dirt moment. And Brené talks about sort of being face down in the dirt, that kind of thing. It's when you make a decision of, am I going to get up and am I going to pretend again and put the facade up and I'm okay and dust myself off, I'm all right, and get the facade back up and project who you are and manage the image, or are you going to get up and go, whoa, that fucking sucked. That hurt. Sorry, I hope I'm allowed to swear. But anyway,
swear.
That hurt,
family.
wow, it's the vulnerability and embracing the imperfection. I failed. That really hurt. That threw me for six. And instead of projecting the facade, just going, yep, I own it. It happened. But here's what I learned from it. Here's how I use that as a springboard to be a better version of me. And so the work that you're talking about is actually in going, all right, what are the triggers, what are the bits that I need to unravel and learn about myself from this? Do I have a pattern of doing that? And often we discover we do.
Yeah, so looking for the patterns is a big clue, isn't it?
Yeah.
What we need to work on.
So what things have repeated themselves across my life? And it may not be exactly the same set of circumstances, but it'll be, I respond in this particular way in circumstances that look like this. And it can be, 6 or 7 different sets of circumstances, but you have a pattern in the way that you will respond when you're challenged in that way.
Can you give an example? Because I love something that I can... tangibly sort of like understand, particularly from a business point of view too, if you can, like somebody that's actually, because a lot of people that listen to this podcast are business owners, and we want to understand how this can relate back to us running our businesses better, showing up in our marketing better, showing up to our teams better.
Okay.
And so being vulnerable but not being messy.
I want to challenge that because life is messy, right?
So when I say messy, okay, still feeling stable if you're a leader.
So emotionally unstable versus messy, right? So being able to emotionally regulate yourself so that you don't...
people still feel like you're driving the ship, that you haven't.
So that's leadership.
Yeah. So you're still able to be vulnerable, own your stuff. Yeah.
So you can be a vulnerable leader. And in fact,
I
think authentic leadership, and this is again a topic that I really warm to, authentic leadership, and you can still be vulnerable. So I don't kind of class that as messy. I think you're talking about sort of emotionally unregulated, which that's really hard to lead from that place. People don't want to follow that.
Vulnerables open the door on people just kind of bleh all their stuff. And,
yes.
There's different levels of it.
Yeah. And some people are just... They overshare for their own reasons. It's not actually about authenticity so much as emotional, drawing people in, and that could be something entirely different. So, what was the question?
A tangible example of where somebody's actually showing their vulnerability and showing that they've done the work. They've had that face in the mud moment, and they've come up. And maybe somebody you've coached, or yourself, or me.
I might actually share a moment of my own, if that's okay, because I'm really not comfortable with sharing information about my clients.
100%.
Unless they've given previous permission to do so. And often they do. But so it's no secret that I had $1 million business, right? And I put it into receivership, okay? There's everybody who, and I'm happy to talk about that.
Yeah, that's a wonderful example.
Right, and it's a difficult thing to own, right? It's a difficult, and I have shame about that. And have worked through that. because I had other people who had invested in my business, family members and things.
Yeah.
So it was a tough situation. But when I look back, there was a pattern when I look at it. There was a pattern of me avoiding particular sets of circumstances. And when I look back, around money, for instance, right, avoiding some of those difficult sets of circumstances. And so when you're dealing with more money, you still have that same pattern.
Yeah,
right?
It's amplified.
It's just amplified, right? And that can be fatal in a business, right?
Mm-hmm,
so if you're going to take that pattern from, this situation into that situation into that situation, then, it's going to be the undoing of your business.
That's a really, really great example, because I think, if you can't manage yourself when you're just one person in whatever it is, in that case it was finances and cash flow, I guess. Yeah.
Right. So
give yourself 10 staff and all of a sudden...
Right. It's just amplified. Same problem, just amplified.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same with sales. A lot of people struggle with believing in themselves, and so they don't want to do the sales, right? Who am I? That imposter syndrome that you hear about a lot. Who am I to be pitching my wares or just setting myself up as an expert in this? And that's a worthiness issue, right, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
They don't recognise that that's where this imposter syndrome comes from. But... that's really what it is. And so, if you're not comfortable doing the small things, you're not going to be comfortable doing the big sales and the becoming more visible, for instance.
Yeah.
So there's lots of those patterns that play out. Because the reality is our businesses are only an extension of who we are.
That's right. And so many people wrap up their whole identity in the business.
Right.
So then if they do come up against, COVID has really brought this to the forefront too. People had to shut their doors or had to pivot or change. It's been amazing watching some people pivot and watching some people collapse.
Oh, yeah. It's been fascinating, hasn't it? I've loved watching a lot of small businesses do amazing things in that space and just be so adaptable and resilient. And, I just have such admiration. But then, I've seen people collapse as well, and hands in the air, and that's it, I can't do it. And
that's amazing.
And identity, that's another great conversation.
So with the self-love, if somebody wants to somebody's listening now and they're kind of thinking far out, I've got these dark sides to my life which I'm keeping hidden. They might have credit card debt that they don't talk to their partner about, or they might have eating disorder. God, it could be anything, things that you're kind of hiding or secret shame or something. Are there things that you can do passively yourself, like starting right this minute, to start uncovering it and becoming a little bit more comfortable, rather than having that big full face in the dirt moment, which you might...
try and avoid. Most of us do try to avoid.
It could be very damaging as well. Is there stuff you can do before you need to fall on your face?
Yeah. And look, not many people willingly fall on their face, I'm going to say that.
Yeah.
That's actually quite a unique skill set, for someone to willingly walk into that kind of pain. And it generally doesn't happen that way. Most people have it thrust upon them.
They're forced into it. Yeah, totally understand.
They have it thrust upon them. And then it's either a catalyst for learning or it's not. Because a lot of people get up, put the spac filler on and get on with it and don't ever do that work. Right?
Yeah, do the work.
Yeah, and there's that phrase again, do the work. So, there is. And I'm not pitching my business here, right? But
pitch your business.
But it's often easier to do it with somebody we can't outthink ourselves.
Well, that's why I've used you in the past.
Right.
Yeah.
We can't outthink ourselves. So it's often easier if we've got somebody who sits outside of our way of thinking, who can be a bit of a North Star for us and go, I'm noticing this pattern, or question and go, hey, you just said something really interesting. And it has to be someone who's prepared to ask the hard questions of you. And you used a word at the beginning when you introduced me that I wasn't really comfortable with, and that was the word counsellor. Sorry. All right? No, it's okay. I don't want to be known as a counsellor. Yes, I have that psychology training background, but I don't want to be a counsellor. I'm a coach. Yeah. A counsellor takes a passive role. I don't do that. You can actually, back me up in that. I don't do that.
There's no point having a passive role either. Like, you're entrepreneurial or business owner, you want to take action and you need to actually get help.
Right, absolutely. So if you want to do some discovery around where you might need to do the work, for instance, journaling is a great way to start. So when you have those little triggers where you go, wow, I've had a really emotional reaction to that. What's going on for me there? Yeah. And so that can be, you're feeling a negative feeling, or it could be that you're feeling a highly escalated happy feeling, joyful. Yeah. So you might do some journaling around that and go, okay, what is it that made me feel that way? What was the trigger for me? And when else have I felt that way? So that's really valuable, because oftentimes there will be a pattern. And so you can actually start to go, I felt it here and I felt it here. Oh, that felt like that time when my brother did X, Y, and Z. Or that felt like that time where I had that school teacher who, really bullied me at school. Or so you're looking for the commonality in the way that you feel. And that's how you start to identify where you might need to do some more work.
So you're looking backwards at stuff that happened in your past?
Yes.
How far backwards do you want to go?
It's kind of like how long is a piece of string?
Yeah.
Because literally, most of us lay down some of these patterns in childhood, 0 to 7.
Yeah.
Pre-verbal even.
I know, and that's so it's hard to go back to preschool times.
Yeah, and you know what? You wouldn't start there.
Yeah,
you wouldn't start there.
Okay.
You start in your most immediate past.
Yeah.
So the things that are affecting you right now. A good coach or a good counsellor, somebody who sits outside of your immediate circle, will be able to start connecting patterns. They get to know you and they go, right, I see a pattern here. You mentioned that was, and I'm seeing a similarity. You've mentioned that happened, or, something in your past. Or they might say, I'm wondering, you've told me about X, Y, and Z, and I'm wondering how this might be connected to that. One of the skills of somebody doing the kind of work that I do is in being able to ask the right questions. And I'm told that this is where I'm very different than a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I ask the right questions.
Because you need to be led. Like, if it's just up to us to try and figure this out, like, everyone goes into a story and defends their situation, and there's always someone else to blame, because otherwise, we've got to blame ourselves. So let's blame somebody else. So I guess that's your job then, isn't it?
It's human nature.
Just to pick up and gently prod back in the right area.
Yeah.
Well, what did you have to do with this? You're the constant.
Yeah, you're the common denominator here.
Yeah.
So let's have.
This keeps happening.
Even if and I have worked with women who've been in abusive situations and have had a lot of trauma background and all sorts of stuff. So even they still bring something to that interaction. Yes, all right, it's the man's, if they've been with an abusive partner, for instance, yes, all right, he shouldn't be using those kinds of control tactics. That's very true. However, what did you bring? Yeah. Why did you allow yourself to be in that sort of circumstances? What was it that disempowered you so you didn't feel like you could walk away? There's still work for you to do too.
That's so you can guarantee the real change. So you don't just repeat the cycle.
Because we can't change what we don't own. And again, that's another cliche, but the reality is until we are taking full responsibility for ourselves outside of what anyone else is doing, you can't change another person's actions, not through coercion, not through manipulation, not through love. But you can always change your own. And so you work on changing yourself, because then you make different decisions.
So I love that you led into that, because I was going to say that is when you actually start to love, accept, acknowledge, own yourself, and you're kinder to yourself, I guess your energy is completely different, and then you start to attract just different people in different scenarios to your life.
Absolutely.
So
different opportunities. It's the full gamut.
So I guess you start this work and you have to be prepared that life's going to change.
Sure is.
Yeah,
absolutely, it's going to change. And sometimes, well, in fact, everybody that I've ever done this work with, right, they will tell you that they go through a period where they feel like they've got no friends, and they feel like, they've shed relationships and ended friendships, or all sorts of things, and they're actually like, oh my God, what's happening?
They've turned their life upside down.
Right, they've turned their life upside down oftentimes. But the reality is they're in a transition period where, and I think it takes about 2 years for the external world to come into alignment with the internal world, where your outside contacts and circle of friends and relationships and circumstances and opportunities match the work you've done internally. Because, so how you do go through that period of changing circles.
I'm going through that. So I'm in the 2-year muck. I know how I manage it, but how do you say to clients to manage that period? Because you've got to stand true. Like, you can fall off. I feel like the universe will test you. I've got, it'll throw things up at you, and it's kind of like, I'm testing you.
Yeah, do you mean it?
Yeah.
Do you mean it? Are you really committed to this?
Yeah, do you want it? How bad do you want it?
Yeah.
And so how do people stay true and stay in the...
So I think it's about having a community around you, people who understand your journey and are part of that.
Yeah.
So that's where a good coach or counsellor can come into it. A community of like-minded people, so finding yourself circles where they're also doing this kind of work.
Authentically doing this work.
Authentically.
Plenty of people say they're doing the work and then you discover that they're not.
Yeah, and look, there's lots of different levels to which you can do that kind of work too. You know, there are people who are quite spiritual and woo-woo, for want of a better word.
So that's how I stay on track.
And then there's very clinical approach. So it's, you know, you've got to find your right community too.
For me, I stay on track. So health is incredibly important to me. So I'm focusing very much on the body and what I put into the body. I rarely drink because I feel like the more connected I am, so I meditate, the more connected I am to myself daily, it's a really beautiful reminder of what I'm doing and what I'm trying to create.
I think you actually touch on something that's really important there. So and in fact, had a conversation with a client just last week about this. I said, look, I think you're in your head too much and you need to get into your body a little more, right? So
the body knows.
You do have to ground into your body as well. So doing, you know, it might be yoga or meditation, could be dance, it could be singing, it could be an exercise program, it could be lifting weights, it could be, you know, any number of different things. And I actually recommended she do several of those things. Because, you know, the work is very cerebral. You're spending a lot of time in your head. Right? So sometimes you need to get out of your head and physically into your body and get grounded. So I think that is equally important, truthfully. It helps you to manage the highly heady stuff.
So what I'm hearing is that, like, I'm Ms. Positivity. I love being positive, but you can't be artificially in that positive space the whole time if you're actually going to get down and...
Well, you're bypassing. And you'll have you ever heard the phrase spiritual bypass?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a word or a phrase that's used a lot in people who are in circles doing the work or selling, you know, the opportunity to do the work. And the reality is, you know, if that false positivity and always looking on the positive side.
Affirmations, I guess, is a part of it, which I love affirmations, but...
They've got a place.
But on their own.
Right, they do have a place. But, you know, the reality is life is not 100% wonderful and happy. That's an unbalanced view. And humans are actually not designed to be happy 100% of the time.
That's heartbreaking.
I know. But that's the reality.
It's true.
We are not created that way. What we are created for is a homeostasis or a contentment and moments of joy. Any emotion, a feeling lasts about 90 seconds. That's all, right? So how many moments of joy do you have to be happy all the time? Is that even real? You know, it's not realistic.
You couldn't live like that.
Of course you can't. It's not realistic. We are made to feel all of the emotions. And so acknowledging that and then not beating ourselves up about some of the darker, more negative emotions. You know, I'm having a down day. That's okay. I'm feeling grief and loss. That's okay. That's a part of the human experience. But, you know, managing it so it doesn't derail us, that's important.
And doesn't become the story of why we can't do X,
and this
Y,
is
Z.
where we're talking about emotional regulation and rather than being a preventative, not allowing us to get on with our lives and achieve the things that we want to achieve in life, you know, because, you know, my catch cry is live a big life. That's what we're all here for in my mind. You know, those things, trauma and all of those negative feelings, if you can't regulate them, they hold you back from living that life. So how do you do that? Yeah.
So loving yourself is, I'm hearing you say, it's being honest.
Being authentic.
Showing up, sharing.
Surrounding yourself with people who can support you in that because we're not meant to live in isolation. We're a social species. We're meant to, we crave connection. It's a human need. Acknowledging that is okay.
The podcast is called Connected.
That's right. It's one of the things that you and I talk about a lot, isn't it?
And the thing, that's what I notice most with clients and in social scenes is that so many people are disconnected. They feel like they're connected, so they're incredibly busy in life, but they're not as connected to themselves about what they actually want to get out of life, what their purpose is, what their why is, what, you know, their very purpose of running their business is or running or managing their life. And then how can you then have fulfilling relationships if you can't even answer those questions about yourself? How can you bring we talked about this morning, how can you bring your best self to another human being if you don't even know what it is?
No, you absolutely can't.
So self-awareness is self-love?
Self-awareness is a step on the way to self-love. Okay, they go hand in glove. It's important.
Hand in glove.
Yeah. So that's we need to have one to have the other.
Yeah.
And you just touched on that connection to self, right? Self-love leads to connection to self. So discovering who we are, learning to love ourselves for all our faults and the positive parts as well. That leads to you feeling connected to yourself, and then you show up in your life and in relationships differently.
Because if you're not fearing what you discover, then you're able to love the dark
and not trying to hide what you what you know about yourself from other people. There is literally nothing more beautiful in the world than being seen by somebody, have them know those parts about you and go, you know what, I love you.
I still love you.
I see all that. It's not just I still love you. That's the temptation to say I still love you. It's actually I love that about you as well. Right, I love that as well as I love that as well.
There's no judgment.
No judgment. It's a part of what you bring. It's a part of who you are. It's a valuable part of your life experience and how you show up in the world. And I love that as well as the rest of you. Not still. Because that still has that connotation of it being something unlovable.
I just judged myself.
Right. It's not unlovable,
Yeah, I know. I totally get the distinction.
And what if we held out for relationships where somebody offered that to us?
Imagine that. That's such a big topic because, at the time, I'm loudly and proudly saying at the time of this episode, we're both single women.
We are.
Beautiful, wonderful women that are sitting in our magnificence with not a set of requirements, but with a very clear idea of the kind of relationship we want to create with another partner, and not out there rushing around looking for it, not settling. It's an interesting time, and I feel it's because we live in a time where we're not getting chased by saber-toothed tigers, and we're not dying at 35 from dysentery or something really bad. We have these periods of time now, of where we have the opportunity to get to discover ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And have these bigger questions that our ancestors never would have ever had the time to discover.
Would have been a bit self-indulgent for them, wouldn't it, when they're trying to run away from saber-toothed tigers?
Or just survive day by day. So I guess this is new territory. I guess every generation, we were talking about our children, seem to do relationships better. The younger generation, let's go there. The younger generation, from our experiences, from our own children, seem to do relationships really well and seem to have a greater self-awareness of who they are and understand what they want and ask bigger questions, because they've lived in an even more affluent time than what we grew up in. So why are they excelling perhaps in an area where us as their parents and grandparents, the boomer generation, are not?
Well, because women like you and I are raising them, Melissa.
I'll take it.
And I often joke with my friends and say we're raising the men we would like to date.
It's so true.
Right? And I know that's, but it is. It's true. Yeah. I'm raising, I look at my 17-year-old. He's a beautiful boy. He's in a lovely relationship. And I look at how he's doing relationship and I'm so impressed. And I have lots of younger male friends, and I just think they're beautiful. And I love how they're doing relationships. So
can we say that they have a greater awareness and a greater self-love? It's a massive generalisation, but can we say that we feel that that's what's happening?
I feel like, yes, is part of the answer. I feel as though, in talking to some of these young men, they have a greater self-awareness and they are casting off a lot of the societal expectations around what it means to be a man and how they should show up in a relationship and in their lives.
That's amazing.
And so, I've got young men that I talk to from their late 20s. I mean, obviously I've got, a 17-year-old son and a 21-year-old son, so definitely them, but right through to their late 20s and early 30s. And, they don't have the same expectations around what it means to be a man and the way they're showing up in the world as their dads did.
Yeah.
I feel like we've given them, as a society, we're giving them more freedom to be themselves, and I think that is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I totally agree. So really we can learn a little bit from them.
I think we can learn a whole lot from them, and I know I've said to some of these 28-year-old men, it's like, do you have a dad that's like you?
Probably not.
No, unfortunately, not usually. But, it's that self-awareness and the unapologetically showing up as who they are, regardless of whether society tells them that that's how a man should be, for instance. And
I do find people that I know from a younger generation have less judgment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's all part of self-love too,
right.
Isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that, that less judgment is a direct result of, them being more open to the full gamut, there's different ways to do being a man, or different ways, you know what I mean? I think that lack of judgment is why they feel freer to step outside of some of those societal norms and things, and they communicate differently, and
So if somebody's watching this and they're really resonating with this message,
yes,
we sort of touched on it, the first steps to take, but what should they do if they're really identifying that they thought, and before they listen to this, that they did have a healthy self-image and great love for themselves? What can they look for, I guess, to further expand on their self-love and expand on their relationship with themselves?
So I think that it's always going to be work that is led by another person, I'll be frank.
Okay, that's cool.
I do feel as though...
Like a partner or a business colleague?
Oftentimes we experience those triggers in relationship, right? It's the relationship. And I'll give you an example. I've been working with a lady for quite some time, and I'm really at a point where I've got this self-love and I've licked this problem and I'm feeling great, enters into a relationship again, and suddenly all of the triggers are coming up.
Yeah, because that's what happens.
Right, she'd spent a year single and not dating, taken herself out of the dating scene, and was feeling as though she was doing really well and had really, that was it. I've solved that problem. I've got it sorted. But the minute she's back in relationship, it's like, these triggers are coming up again, because it's in response to an intimate partnership that the triggers will often come up.
So it's being tested.
It's going to be tested, right? Yeah. And so sometimes that's a pointer that you need to go and do some more work, right? Yeah. If you've got self-worth issues, another thing that we see is that bravado. The minute I see somebody doing the bravado thing, I know they've got a self-worth issue, because they overcompensate, right? Yeah. So often we don't have the insight ourselves, and so that's where working with a coach or a mentor or something like that, they can actually point you in the right direction and do sort of guided exercises with you. I don't think that it's work that we often are very good at doing in a self-directed manner. So you can find yourself a community, you can find yourself somebody who does events. There's lots of people out there doing this kind of work, just depending on how deep you want to go.
So I just guess that if you have a sense that you want to do your life differently,
yes.
If you have goals that you're not reaching,
yes.
If you are finding that life feels like it's just repeating, and it's these are the triggers to then perhaps go and get in touch with either yourself or somebody like you to have a conversation, and then just see what the next steps are.
Explore. Speaking for myself, I always do, I hate the word discovery call, but I always do a free call with a client, to have a potential client, to have a conversation about whether or not we're a good match to work together. Yeah. I'm not made for everybody, and no one is. So you might need to do some exploration.
It's the same in my business.
Right? You might need to do some exploration about who you work with and what is aligned with, firstly, your goals and the style of work that you like to do, etc. But increasing your self-awareness is the first step, obviously. Yeah. So that you can go, I think I've got a pattern, or hey, I'm not really happy with the results I'm getting. Sometimes there's a rising sense of dissatisfaction with life. I feel like I've got all this potential and I'm not realising it. Or
I think when you get to our age too, in the more in your 40s and 50s, and your kids are growing up, and really for the first time you slow down. Yeah. You're not having to do the school run all the time. Life just gets, and you really do reassess, and you think, I might only have another 30, 40 years on the planet. I better make sure they're good.
Right. Don't want to waste it.
I haven't done X, Y, Z. Yeah. So this is probably a pivotal age as well to really.
I feel as though, this sort of midlife age that we're at is where, you have that realisation, and the whole sort of midlife crisis is a bit of a cliche, right? Yeah. But that's exactly what happens.
Totally.
You go, oh my gosh, I've been living a life of duty up to this stage. I've done all the things. I've had all this responsibility. I've had to do all these things.
Yeah.
And now what? This second half is for me. What would I be devastated or disappointed if I got to the end of my life and I hadn't done?
Yeah.
And for me, when I put the restaurant into receivership, I was, physically, mentally exhausted. And it was a case of I suddenly, for the first time in my life, had time to reflect.
Yeah.
Because I used to use busyness. Workaholism was my addiction of choice.
That's a great trigger that we were talking about before. How do you know if you need to do the work? If you're a workaholic?
Yeah.
It's a bit of a...
Let me say this. Workaholism is the most socially acceptable addiction out there because it's also well rewarded.
I know. And most of us can put our hands up and say, I'm a workaholic.
Right. If you're in business, people validate being busy and it is rewarded, usually financially. Even if you're an employee, workaholism is rewarded financially. People
we wear it like a badge of honour. If you go to bed at 2 a.m. and get up at 5 a.m. and you're at the gym, you're a big hero.
Right. Oh my God, I've got these stress headaches and I'm so busy and I'm
I know.
So we shouldn't be doing that. But so be wary. It's just another form of addiction.
Yeah.
And it's so for me that was my go-to. I loved being busy.
Oh, you're a significant person when you're busy.
Right. I was very significant in my own mind. And so I hid behind workaholism, and what that meant was I didn't have to deal with myself.
Yeah.
And when I put the business into receivership and I suddenly had time, I had this little existential crisis where I went, holy crap, I've removed all of the distractions. I've removed and it's like I've got nothing. Now, because my marriage ended just before that as well. So it was like, well, who do I want to be? What kind of a life do I want to have? Here's my chance to start at ground zero and start again.
So most of my clients, I find when I ask them, when we're doing a marketing strategy or something, I say, what do you want to get out of this? What's your why in your business? What are your goals? What do you want to achieve? Once we break down the monetary stuff, then I'm like, well, what do you want in your personally, what do you want to achieve? They don't have answers.
And that's where they lose.
There's no answers. And it's
realistically, sorry, I didn't mean to cut across you then, but realistically, shouldn't we know that first and then the business is an extension
of that? You think?
That's, to me, that's the way it should work. We know that we answer that stuff about ourselves and our lives, and then business is an extension of that. I truly believe if you're here to fulfill a mission in life, if you feel like you've got a mission, right?
Yeah.
Then
I'm passionate.
Right. Mm. Discovering what that is an important part of, that's what we're here for in my mind, right? And then, the business is a result. It's the vehicle that you take that to the world with. So I feel like you've got to have that done first in order to be able to answer the questions that you're asking, really.
So how can people, we might wrap up there, this has just been such a fascinating topic, I love it. And to me, we talked about this earlier, you're never done, are you?
No, there's no such thing.
Yeah, and you shouldn't ever be done because that's the exciting part of life. We live these amazing lives. We're not being chased by saber-toothed tigers. We have time to work on ourselves. We have these beautiful big brains and hearts and opportunities to connect in ways that our ancestors couldn't. Technology to connect in ways that our ancestors couldn't. Make a better planet. I mean,
so I feel as though, and there are certain theories that would agree with my thoughts, but Maslow and others, where we talk about self-actualization.
Yeah.
And so the highest purpose of a human being, of their lived experience here on this planet, is to actually be the best version of themselves.
I love it. Why
and
wouldn't
so
you want to be that?
I talk about living your big life, and that's what I'm talking about. It's about self-actualizing. It's about being the best version of yourself, and that's different for every single person. So from my perspective, that's what I'm here to do, help people, and I know that's my mission, right? So my mission is to help people live the big life. And how do I do that? Well, by helping them to identify patterns, remove trauma, imprints, and heal, do all of those things, set goals, that whole thing.
Yeah, the whole gamut.
Yeah.
So how can people get in touch with you?
Social media is the best way. Karyn Battersby.
Yep. I'll put that up on the thing.
Yeah, look me up. I've got an online coaching group that I run, which is a 12-month program. I also do one-on-one coaching.
You're very active on Facebook and Instagram as well, so lots of motivational and interesting stories. Like you give lots of examples, which is what I like, real life examples, so you can relate to it. And there's lots of good discussion that happen on your posts as well. So.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much,
Thank you,
Karyn.
Melissa. Great to catch up as always.
I know. It's been a treat. And Karyn's actually living quite a nomadic life too, so I quickly describe that and then I'll sign out.
Okay.
What does that look like?
So I've made the decision. I've committed to being a digital nomad full time. It's something I've been wanting to do for 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah.
So I recently got rid of all of my possessions.
Yeah.
I now have 2 suitcases worth of clothing.
Yeah.
And some podcasting gear.
Yeah.
An office in a bag. That's it. And I'm at this stage sort of travelling around different places within Australia, and obviously maybe not obviously, but when the international borders open up, I intend to take that international. So,
and that was part of your plan.
It's a whole nother story, it's a part of my growth and, challenging myself and, very intentional.
And that's a really good point to end on, is it's all about living intentionally, isn't it? Just an intentional life. So thank you so much, Karyn. Thank you guys for listening to the podcast. And I hope you, if you like this, you like what you hear, get in touch with Karyn. She's an amazing, amazing mentor and coach and counsellor, and somebody that has really impacted and changed my life incredibly. And if you like this, share this with somebody that you think that this might help as well, if you recognise the triggers of what we spoke about. Because the most successful people could be people that still need to actually work on themselves and do this kind of work, so you can be better and share your message and what you have inside of you with more people, and make the planet better.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
Thanks very much, and we'll tune in next week to Connected with Melissa J. Scott.
Beautiful. Thanks, Melissa.
Exactly.
I truly believe if you want to get it right, and if you're here to put
God. Oh my God. All right. So, yeah. All right. It's done well. Thank God this didn't happen right at the beginning. It's liking that ridge. Okay.
I truly believe if you feel like you're here
Start
to
again because I
fulfill,
was laughing. Yeah.